NecroDancer.
Hello there, Gamerinos and Gamerinas. Welcome to UnicornStorm. This is Rady, and today I'm taking a look at Rift of the NecroDancer, the sequel to the highly acclaimed Crypt of the NecroDancer. At least I think it was highly acclaimed. It has certainly been quite popular. Popular enough to warrant a collaboration with Nintendo of all people, corporations. And with the Zelda franchise no less. And the resulting game was awesome. It featured some great remixes of songs from the whole series that have been perfectly incorporated into the gameplay. And the game instantly became one of my favorite rhythm games. And ranks highly among my favorite Zelda games. Now, Crypt of the NecroDancer had a rather unique concept. A fresh take on the roguelike turn-based dungeon crawler formula. It was still turn-based, with enemies only moving when you take a turn, in principle. The genre mix with the rhythm game made this a lot more interesting. Now the turn automatically progressed in time with the beat of the music. It took out all the planning and strategizing and thinking ahead and replaced it with a more reactive and dexterous gameplay, where you had to adapt at a moment's notice, all while keeping in rhythm. And it was amazing. A great idea to combine these two genres and expertly executed. Such a fun and unique experience. Rift of the NecroDancer is less so. Oh, it's still a fun take on its genre, this time around the well-known... is there actually a name for it? Let's go with scrolling rhythm game. That has been popularized by games like Dance Dance Revolution and of course Guitar Hero. There are countless games like that out there, both major and indie releases, and I enjoy them quite a lot. With the more reasonable ones more than the insane ones. And while every one of those games has their own little quirks, they broadly function the same every time. And yeah, when we look at the vast majority of notable releases in that genre, then Rift of the NecroDancer does a lot to differentiate itself from the rest. I mean, some games have a bit of an unfair advantage just because of the peripherals they use, but when it comes to pure digital interaction, then Rift is quite a bit more unique, for better or worse. So the gameplay, for the most part, with just a handful of exceptions, is a vertically scrolling rhythm game, where you hit commands on 3 lanes to the beat of the music. Miss a command and you lose a bit of health. Lose all your health and you have to start over. And when you last throughout the whole song, you unlock the next song in your setlist. In that regard, the game is like all the others. There is no exploration, no different paths, no equipment, no shortcuts, nothing. It's a standard music game where you have to complete each and every song. So, I have to be honest, I was a bit disappointed. It's not the game's fault. I was just so enthralled by the first game and even more its spin-off, that I expected a bit more, or well, something else I guess. I mean, the game could have done a bit more to distinguish itself from the rest when it comes to progression, and I'm gonna talk about this in a bit, but before that, let's talk about how the game does differentiate itself from the competition. Instead of hitting notes, you have to hit monsters, and those monsters aren't just a different look for the same thing. In typical fashion for the NecroDancer games, each monster follows a certain behavior, on time with the music. Other games have notes you need to press, some you need to hold, and those are certainly also in this game. And sometimes there are a few more variations, like the hammer-ons and pull-offs in Guitar Hero or the clapping in Donkey Konga. But those diversify the gameplay not really that much. Here you have slimes, which are stationary on their lane, and the differently colored slimes take a differing amount of hits. Then there's bats that switch lanes after a hit, as determined by their color and the direction they're looking. Skeletons lose their head and run away just to approach you again after they collided with an obstacle. Zombies zigzag around, some enemies can wrap around the board and appear on the other side, some can skip a square on the board and approach you faster than you'd expect, some charge up for a spell before approaching you instantly, and then there's even traps, effects that might appear out of nowhere on the board that alter the enemy's behavior. So it's not just about staying in rhythm and not getting your fingers tangled up hitting the commands on the 3 lanes. You have to memorize the enemy's behaviors and anticipate how they alter upcoming commands. Not every enemy is a winner here. The standard skeleton is functionally just the same as a standard slime, so all it does is add to the confusion you might have from trying to remember all the patterns without adding anything to the gameplay. Also, I guess the color schemes could have been universally normed, with all 1-hit enemies being green, 2-hit enemies being blue, and so on. It would certainly increase the readability of the board on the more difficult levels, which is kinda important. An enemy that takes more hits moves back on the board, so they might move next to another enemy, and now you have to hit 2 commands simultaneously. And especially those that move sideways can throw a wrench in the works. Especially the bats get me way too often with that. This isn't an easy game. It's not unreasonably hard. I mean, there are custom songs, but, well, every rhythm game player base has those freaks who play these incredibly fast and complicated command sequences flawlessly. But for the main set list, it's just a generally less forgiving game. It's not a beginner's rhythm game, it's not just a fun ride, because again, staying on beat isn't all you have to do here. You have to be aware of the enemy's movement patterns at all times, remember their quirks, adapt to the traps quickly. And then there's also enemies who aren't on beat, sometimes not even on the off beat. Now they are marked for you, but that's just another thing you have to keep your attention on. You also have to get used to the way this game handles the scrolling screen. Well, I guess it's just the enemies approaching you, but the results are the same. The game kinda emulates its predecessor style by moving the enemies a whole square closer to you with every beat, instead of scrolling the screen smoothly. It totally works, but it can also throw you off with some of the timings. And the bouncing enemies don't make it any easier, but these animations can be turned off in the settings. It might take a bit of time to get used to it, but it works surprisingly well. Maybe the checkerboard background could have had a bit more different shades to make anticipating the movement easier, maybe as an option next to removing it outright, but it works nonetheless. Now, the game starts rather unceremoniously. There is a neat intro animation that sets the mood or something. It shows off the characters we get to meet and of course our heroine Cadence. But then we're just on the main menu. The first option, that's also already highlighted, is play. So there's no real reason to not choose it. Which brings you to the game's music list. Most songs haven't yet been unlocked, so you have to play through the available ones to earn crystals to unlock the rest. There's also a helpful tutorial in here. Helpful in that you really need it, because it explains how the enemies behave. Though, it's a bit much upfront. I guess this could have been better integrated, maybe in some sort of story mode, where the songs could have some alterations. Maybe with some breaks where the characters talk, explain some things before the action resumes. Well, there actually is a story mode. It's this small option down here. And it's not that remarkable, to be honest. It's just another music list, more or less the same as in the play mode, just with some cutscenes and a handful of minigames in between. Now, I won't take away from the alternate play modes, but as a story mode, this here doesn't satisfy, not after what the original game has done for rhythm games. And well, it just has the same tutorial at the start. You don't have to select it, so that is nice, but it's also not integrated into the story, which is less nice. The first real track to select is a cutscene that throws you right in and has Cadence meet up with her friend, and the story kinda expects you to understand everything. I thought I missed something, but it really is the start of the story, where a whole lot has already happened and Cadence and her friends have been stuck in another world for weeks now. I guess that's what the intro animation is trying to show, but I don't think it does a really good job in conveying the story. I mean, it looks more like a montage of things to come. Now you might say, dude, what do you want? Why do you even care about a story in a rhythm game? And to that I say, I guess you're right. On the other hand, there are some rhythm games with pretty neat stories, with stakes and drama and everything, with one of my favorites being Space Channel 5, where, At the low point of the story, the music reflected the protagonist's grief over another character's death. And this game's prequels already merged rhythm and adventuring so aptly, so it's a shame that this game does this so poorly. The cutscenes also are just your standard visual novel style dialogues with static backgrounds and character portraits doing most of the visual work. It's not bad or anything, just nothing special. But yeah, story mode is just playing the same songs in a row with bits of rather unremarkable dialogue in between and a pretty weak narrative with lots of beating around the bush to create artificial mystery. Yeah, it's obvious that I'm not impressed. And I guess now's the part where I talk about how the game could have done more genre mixing. The standard play mode is fine as it is, with you playing through a whole song and try to get the highest score possible. Nothing wrong with that. But for the story mode, the game could have done a bit more. Why are the songs played exactly the same as in standard mode? I mean, most rhythm games do this, but again, this is the sequel to Crypt of the NecroDancer. So why aren't the songs more battle focused? Cadence even says at some point that she's more about fighting than anything else. So instead of doing the same thing every other rhythm game does, why couldn't the songs be all about actually defeating the enemies? Like, give each song in the story a different goal. Defeat so and so many zombies and the like. And after you've reached the goal, the song might continue until the end, but you've already cleared the mission, so beating it is only to generate extra points or more gems or whatever. Maybe even work towards alternate paths or build up an advantage over the boss at the end of the chapter. Sometimes you just fight goons alongside a friend, but other times you're actually fighting a major opponent. So why do these battles not have a hit point gauge for the enemy that decreases every time you hit a command? Maybe even to differing amounts depending on your timing. Or only have certain special attack commands and you have to hit a sufficient amount before the song ends. Similarly to the Theater Rhythm games. There is something akin to this already in the game. At the end of each chapter you have to face off against a boss in a rhythm minigame where you have to press the appearing commands with the right timing. First to evade the enemy's attack and avoid damage, and then to counterattack and deal damage. These play more like Elite Beat Agent, albeit not that crazy. It's a fun way to end a chapter and give some variety to the gameplay. And it wouldn't work any less if previous battles already had an enemy health bar. Other minigames that pop up during the different chapters remind me a lot of Rhythm Heaven. You have less obvious on-screen prompts and have to rely more on your sense of rhythm to repeat commands or press the correct button on time. They're a fun diversion, but I could have used a bit more feedback, either visually or orally. But yeah, they're presented in a fun way and do more with the story than the actual cutscenes. Though I don't understand why I have to shoot sexy photos of a dude as promotion for his art exhibition. Now, my gripes with some not fully embraced potential, let's call it that, aside, I still enjoy this game a lot. I'm not good at it. I make too many mistakes, because I still treat it too much like a regular scrolling rhythm game and don't think ahead with the different enemies' behaviors. I mean, I do, but not to the extent I need to be good at this game. And there's somewhat of a learning curve to the game, and a lot of room to improve. And it's some great fun. Not sure how you should beat some of the custom songs though. And yeah, there's endless replayability, at least on PC, with all the custom songs. The game is planned to be released on Nintendo Switch as well, but I don't think there will be custom songs on there also. Maybe custom command sequences with the existing songs, but I don't think you could just import any piece of music on the Switch. But yeah, there's also a pretty nifty editor to create your own custom songs. It's rather easy to use, but not that well explained. I mean, nothing is explained and you just have to try everything and fidget around with it to find the things you need and options you want to adjust. But that aside, it's pretty cool that it's just there and doesn't require programming or tech wizardry to make your own levels. There's already a lot of great music here. I mean, what did you expect from a NecroDancer game? But the promise of even more great music through the community is just icing on an already darn delicious cake. The game is a blast. The enemies hopping around the scrolling lanes make the rhythm gameplay so engaging in a different kind of way to the game's contemporaries. You might have to get used to the way the game scrolls, with it jerking a step forward on every beat, but this just fits the style from the previous game, and the bouncing character portraits are a nice nod towards it as well. The developers surely had some good fun with a lot of the elements of this game, and it results in a lot of fun for the players. So yeah, if you're into rhythm games, this one is at least worth giving it a shot. There's a demo for it, a practice I'm glad is slowly returning to the gaming scene, so you can just check it out before committing to a purchase. I'm having a blast with it, despite some of my criticisms. I don't think it surpasses or even reaches its predecessor, but I still wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone with a love for music games. And with that, I'm off. You have an amazing day. This has been Rady, and I hope to see you again on the next game.